She was just everything a dad would want.
She was very outgoing, very big-hearted.
Yeah.
Loved animals.
If this case is solved, it's going to be off of a tip.
And we know there's a lot of people out there who know, who have information.
Limited evidence and a lot of rumors.
I mean, look at all the coincidences.
They just had a personal relationship there, even to this day.
So just to be clear, you in no way are protecting anyone?
No way. Absolutely not.
For 29 years, the death of a little girl in central Wisconsin has gone unsolved. It's a complicated case filled with confusing testimony, a skeptical family, and a sheriff's office under deep scrutiny. But at the core, it's about the death of Deidre Week and the search to find her killer. I'm Cassandra Cepeda, and this is Forgotten: Who Killed Deidre Week? There are a lot of really great things about childhood. Bike riding was one of my favorites, and honestly, it still is. I remember the first time I rode mine without training wheels. It was on a gravel road outside my grandpa's house in Bancroft, Wisconsin. I remember flying down the road and getting my first taste of freedom, which I think is why this case resonates with me so much. On March 24th, 1995, Deidre Week was 11 years old when she rode her bike to a Vesper convenience store after 4-H play practice to get some snacks and a soda. This would have been around 6:20 p.m., so dusk, but still light outside. There weren't any sidewalks on the county road she needed to take, but it was just 1 mile away from her house. A quick Google search estimates about a 5-minute bike ride one way.
You know, I was doing the chores around there, making dinner and stuff, and then about the time she should be home, I was out feeding the dogs, and I actually heard the sound. I heard a crash.
The voice you just heard was Deidre's dad, David Week. Shortly after hearing that sound around 6:30, David said he decided to look for his daughter.
I just had to check that out because she should have been coming home about that time. So I jumped in my truck and I went up to the edge of the driveway.
While waiting to turn, he saw 2 vehicles fly past heading north. The first one, a silver color. He couldn't describe the color of the second vehicle, only that one of them had a really loud muffler. After they went by, David turned right out of his driveway onto County Road HH, heading south.
I was looking, and then I seen her bike in the middle of the road.
At first, he thought maybe Deidre had gotten distracted by a lost animal.
We found a kitten there one time, and I thought she found another kitten.
Sadly, just 500 yards down the road from their house, he found his little girl, the way no father should.
I was probably in shock at that point, you know, and then I seen her in the ditch and stuff, and, you know, and she was in a little bit of water too, so I took her out of there.
After a few minutes, David went to a nearby house to call 911.
It was almost like she was telling me not to be around there any longer than I had to. And I could never figure that out till later on, and it was that I would have had those memories. And so, and I knew she was gone.
Then he called his wife, Brenda. Shortly after first responders arrived, Deidre was taken to a nearby hospital via helicopter where she was later pronounced dead. However, David wasn't the only one to call 911 that night. A man named Jim Vrewink also called for help.
He had witnessed this scene, this incident take place, and he was one of the ones that called for emergency vehicles.
The 31-year-old was the driver of the second vehicle David saw that night. Now, there are dozens of articles and documents that outline Jim's account of that night, and not all of them are the same.
Well, there's so many reports and there's so many conflicting reports, it's very difficult to keep this case straight because there's so many different statements coming in from different neighbors and different individuals.
I wasn't kidding. But with the help from Lieutenant Scott Goldberg with the Wood County Sheriff's Department, I am going to do my best to summarize what Jim said he witnessed. I also included a map at wsaw.com so you can get a better visual of what I'm describing. According to documents from the Wood County Sheriff's Department, Jim was interviewed and spoke with multiple officers on the scene that night and in the days and weeks and months later. According to one report, on the night of the crash, Jim said he was driving south on County Road HH, heading into Vesper to drop off a car part in town. At the time, Jim worked with cars and still does to this day, owning a used car dealership in Wisconsin Rapids. While driving, he described seeing a swerving car driving toward him and a sudden cloud of smoke. But it wasn't until he got closer he realized the vehicle in question hit a person. Reports go on to say Jim saw a little girl in the ditch, honked his horn to get someone's attention, turned his car around, and began pursuing the striking vehicle. However, I have read dozens of pages of reports and I couldn't find one that said a neighbor heard a horn where Deidre was hit, including David, who, remember, heard the initial crash. After turning around, Jim said he followed the speeding car for about 2 miles before losing it near a curve in the road. 10 Pass Road, if you're looking at the map. At that point, Jim said he drove 1 mile north to his house and called 911 around 6:45 p.m. Then he said he switched cars so he could have a faster one. And if you think that sounds weird, so does Deidre's family.
The chase was already done and over with at that point. So why are you switching cars?
Yeah.
And then that car broke down at the scene.
That's Deidre's cousin, Kelly Cornelius, and she's right. After switching cars, Jim returned to the scene, where later his car had to be towed home because of battery issues. Now let's talk about the striking car in question, and there are a lot of questions. If you're wondering if Jim got a license plate number, the answer is no, saying he never got close enough to see it. He could confirm there were 2 people inside, but couldn't be certain if they were male or female. He also said flat out he did not know who the car belonged to. The color of the vehicle is also unclear.
It was possibly a Cavalier, Chevrolet body style or similar. He believed that it was a 2-tone vehicle, darker color on top and possibly silver or gray on the bottom.
Okay.
But we have received different statements of what that vehicle is, what the vehicle's driving down Double H that night. That has conflicted that statement. So at this time, we're still not wanting the public just to be looking for that type of a vehicle. It could be any vehicle with front end damage.
And it's the inconsistency of the vehicle description that's a huge problem for Deidre's dad.
And then he couldn't give a solid color of the car, and he couldn't give the make of the car. But what was his job? He sold cars. This is just crazy.
While a 2-tone description was given, a report by then investigator Thomas Reichert lists 2 other witnesses along County Highway HH describing 2 vehicles. Both indicate seeing a silver color vehicle first, matching David's account. Throughout the night, deputies searched nearby taverns, roads, and driveways for a car with any damage, but never found one matching the description of what was given by Jim. Later, around 11 p.m., about 4.5 hours after the crash, Jim called the sheriff's department and was interviewed at his house. Also, all the cars in his lot were examined, and none were found to have matching damage. That same night, another man, who the Week family considers to be their prime suspect, was also interviewed. Although I can't say for certain if his vehicle was checked that night or in the hours that followed. As you can probably guess, I'm not going to name any suspects because, as of this recording, no one has ever been charged with Deidre's death. During that conversation with deputies, that person admits to being at JoJo's bar with a friend in the hour leading up to the crash. Reports taken that night also confirm their presence in the bar. However, the time when they leave depends on who you ask. Eyewitness reports give a variety of answers, some close to the time of the crash, others the hour before. According to notes from that night, the person says they left the bar at 5:30 p.m. The timing is very important because JoJo's bar is located 1 mile south of the Weeks' home, off of County Road HH and 1 block from Winch's, where Dedra had left riding her bike. Which means if the person who hit Dedra was coming from the bar or in town, it likely would have been around 6:30 p.m.
There's a lot of speculation that possibly alcohol was involved. Could have been just distracted driving. We don't know the reason that this person hit Dedra.
I think it's also important to note that the person who the Week family said was behind the wheel was also known to have professional experience with cars. Less than 2 months later, Jim would undergo a polygraph exam about his knowledge of the crash. In the summary conclusion, the examiner said they felt Jim was being truthful to the questions asked. They included questions like, did you strike Deidre Week with a motor vehicle? And are you withholding information regarding the accident involving Deidre Week? To which he all said no and passed. There was one question, however, that did raise a small red flag. Here's what the examiner said, quote, the only minuses that I had on the whole examination was a little bit on the question if he knew who had done this. We had much discussion on that. He certainly doesn't test out that he knows it, but every person could have an opinion even though it wasn't specific. But that minus was so minor that it didn't affect the examination in any way, end quote. I reached out to Jim in hopes of getting his perspective.
You reached him. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you. Thank you.
But I never heard back. From the very beginning of the investigation, the Week family feels like the case was severely mishandled by one person specifically.
We just wish that he would have done something about it, I blame everything on him. Not everything, but not getting solved is totally on his back.
If it weren't for him, I think we would have had this solved decades ago.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the coincidences.
Well, I actually get the investigation going. Because when they started their own investigation, it kind of slowed things down. I really feel bad for someone who's lost a child.
That is former Wood County Sheriff Brian Illingworth. In countless interviews, articles, and social media posts, the family has expressed frustrations about their interactions with Illingworth, sometimes describing them as outright hostile.
He got right in my face, and my brother was there, and they all thought that he was trying to get me to hit him or something. And then, boy, that would have thrown the case. I didn't. But from that point on, things got worse.
Because it wasn't just her passing, but it was, there was harassment and everything that they were dealing with.
I didn't understand why. So I asked the former sheriff for his thoughts on the investigation.
It's something I can't forget, something I find very frustrating. It would have been good if we could, had been able to solve it. That's really all I can say.
Don't worry, our conversation didn't stop there. Back in 1995 and in the years that followed, the family very publicly accused the sheriff's department of intentionally botching the investigation because of the personal and professional connections between the witness, Jim Vrewink, the potential suspects, and then Sheriff Illingworth. I wanted to know, back in 1995, was he friends with the witness?
Yeah, I know Jim Vrewink. I've known him for some time.
And would you describe your relationship as a friendship or professional?
Jim was a friend of mine.
Okay.
But in no way did I impede the investigation. If he did it, he did it. I'm not going
Just a side note, I am not accusing Jim of anything. Another point of contention, a massive investigation and case study commissioned by the Weeks suggests that back in the early 90s, the Wood County Sheriff's vehicles were regularly serviced at one of the suspect's businesses, which turns out to be true.
And, we did some business with
Okay, so that would be his.
Correct.
Okay. And was questioned about the crash as a suspect, correct?
I believe so.
And it was conflict of interest. Maybe
Yeah.
somebody outside of the county should have been investigating right away.
Because Illingworth, the sheriff at the time, considered the witness a friend and had a working relationship with one of the suspect's businesses, the family feels that the Wood County Sheriff's Department should not have led the investigation.
Well, Tom Riker was the investigator on it, and Tom Riker was the sheriff after me.
Illingworth was sheriff from 1988 to January of 1999. Dedra was killed in 1995. In a stack of reports, I found an internal document noting that David and Brenda Week asked for the Department of Criminal Investigation to get involved. That was April 18th, just 3 weeks after the hit and run. However, it says DCI denied their request, saying everything necessary had already been done and they would not have an agent free to work on the case. Then in August, a letter from Sheriff Illingworth asks DCI to provide an investigator, which Lieutenant Goldberg says does happen.
It's important that the public knows that the Department of Justice worked this case pretty quickly after this incident took place and assisted with the investigation. So there was an independent agency that looked at this case.
It's been years, maybe even decades, since anyone spoke with Illingworth about Deidre's case. I wanted to be direct.
If at any point the current sheriff's department wanted to interview you or, give you a polygraph, would you be willing to do that?
I have no idea why they would want to give me a polygraph. I don't understand that.
So just to be clear, you in no way are protecting anyone.
No way. Absolutely not. There's only so many ways I can say I wasn't complicit in the investigation. I did not compromise the department. I did not compromise myself.
While Deidre's family is certain they know who hit her, the sheriff's office says it's still working to find the right person or persons and make an arrest.
There's not one suspect in this case. We have a list of suspects in this case, and the important part about that is it's easy to look at a case very quickly and determine who has done this. It's another thing to create this probable cause to what actually took place.
During their interview with me, Kelly and David both spoke very highly of the department, now operating under Sheriff Sean Becker, who was elected in 2018.
He's done a lot of stuff that was never done before. So if our family, you can see it just levitate. It just made us a little more happier than we were before all this.
And I think we need to realize too, the majority, Sheriff Becker may be the only person that actually was working here when this took place. This is a whole different group, a whole different generation of officers and investigators.
Including Lieutenant Scott Goldberg. He has been with the Wood County Sheriff's Department for 17 years, but he's been a part of the community his entire life.
So I went to Lincoln High School in Rapids. I went to college at UWSP, and I started in Adams County as a deputy there and moved back home.
For Lieutenant Goldberg, this isn't just another case.
I went to school with Deidre and her brother was the same grade as me when this all took place. So it was very near and dear. I remember right where I was when I heard the news because I was helping the neighbor on a farm milk cows.
So when he became an investigator, he knew he wanted to be part of the team to hopefully solve this case and give the Week family answers.
I would be the first person to say if I knew there was some type of corruption or something like the rumors have suggested in the past, I'd be the first one to come forward.
I personally saw how the family and the investigator interacted when I went to the department to conduct the interviews for this episode. But I'll let David tell you what he thinks.
I think that if they find solid evidence and everything, that they're going to do something about it. I never thought that before.
Lieutenant Goldberg was honest, saying the techniques used nearly 30 years ago are different than what they would use today. But just because they don't have the answer right now, that doesn't mean the case is inactive.
It's not a cold case, it's an old case. It's important for the public to understand that we don't advertise every interview that we do. It's important to understand that on at least a weekly or bi-weekly time frame, we're doing something with this case. And there's a lot of things happening in the background.
Including an excavation done in a Wood County field connected to a pond area to find the striking vehicle. While the search was unsuccessful, the investigator says the department takes credible tips seriously.
It's important for the public to know that that's the type of investigation that we're doing. We're going above and beyond trying to find this vehicle or any type of evidence to this case.
The department is also still investigating Deidre's case as a homicide.
At this point, we don't know if she was hit intentionally, if it was an accident. We don't know those details. So obviously statute of limitations could come into play if it was an accident, but depending on the intention of the person or what took place.
Intentional or not, the family wants answers. The Weeks have a lot more to say, and quite frankly, I can't go into them all. But you can, thanks to Deidre's cousin, Kelly.
We were just 3 months apart in age. She was like a sister. She was supposed to come over to my house at night for a sleepover.
The family paid hundreds of dollars to get a massive set of county documents, including letters, officer reports, polygraph results, and interdepartment communication from the sheriff's office related to Deidre's case. Kelly has been the driving force behind making sure every single document they receive is available to the public on their website, justicefordeidreweek.com, and constantly updates their Facebook page. I'll be sure to include the links at wsaw.com so you can read them for yourself. Over the years, the family has never let the pain stop them from celebrating Deidre's short but beautiful life.
We did the opposite. We pushed it. We celebrate her birthdays, everything.
The family also put up billboards, held protests, and has continued to rally support from near and far.
I think it's really impacted the community more than we thought it would.
Living in a close-knit community like Vesper can have incredible benefits, like a sense of camaraderie and loyalty. But sometimes loyalty can be blind and ultimately get in the way of what's right.
Yep. I think part of it is people are scared.
Yeah.
People are cowardly, or they're afraid of being judged.
It's difficult to face the consequences, but I think in this case, in this situation, it's been 29 years. Give the family some peace and allow them to figure out what actually happened that day.
Deidre was just an 11-year-old girl riding her bike when her life was taken from her. The truth shouldn't be buried anymore. And when I asked David about what it would mean to learn the truth one day, he said this.
Well, my idea is that I will know someday. I will know someday. When I pass on and I go in heaven because I've been a good father and a good husband, I'm going to heaven and I will learn then. I will learn the exact truth then.
Deidre, you have not been forgotten. If you have any information about the death of Deidre Week, please call the Wood County non-emergency line at 715-421-8700.